Good afternoon. This is the May 17 meeting of the Fairfield Harbor Management Commission. This is Kim Taylor, the chair. I'm on the phone. Jack Hirschler, Jeff Warren, and Bill Perugini are in person at the Sullivan Independence Hall first floor conference room, as is Brian LeClaire, the Harbormaster, Jeff Stedman, our consultant, and I understand that Betty is on her way down. And so to get this meeting started, the first order of business would be to pledge allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Super. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we have March 15 and April 19 meeting minutes to approve. They were distributed along with the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the March minutes as presented?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay.
Bill
moves, and
I think I have. I'm not sure.
I think you have to too, Jack. Yeah. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The April minutes. Can I have a motion to accept them as presented?
I'll make the motion.
I will second. Jack second.
Jack second. All in favor?
Aye.
Sam Cargill present.
Excellent, Sam. Great you could join us.
All right, you're going to mute. I'm at a lacrosse game.
Okay. So the chairman's report. On May 2nd, the commission received an email from Joseph Salvatore of the Port Authority of Connecticut. He is announcing a request for applications for SHIP grants from municipalities who are seeking to improve their waterways, and the deadline for those applications would be July 1 of this year. On May 3rd, we got a copied on the deep email to Mr. Bishop and to other Fairfield town officials in relation to their request to do some work on the culverts around South Pine Creek. And on May 12th, we received an email from Race to Mr. Bishop, Mr. Short, and to us attaching the structures, dredging, and fill application that they are required to submit to DEEP in connection with the structure at 1143-1155 Sasko Hill Road. I think that we will be discussing that later on in the meeting under the new applications section of the agenda. But we have a guest speaker this evening, and I think that is our first order of business. And I've asked Jack to introduce him to us, not only who he is and what he does, but just a bit of reasoning about why we think it might be important to begin to think about electric powered engines in the harbor. So, Jack?
Thanks, Kim. So, as Kim indicated, David's presentation is about recreational boating electric propulsion and trends related to that, and is intended to assist us in our work as we work on updating the harbor management plan this year. As you know, the harbor management plan has not been updated since 1995, which is 27 years ago. So that's the work that we are working on this year. So in the back of your mind, as you listen to David's presentation and get to ask him questions, I would ask you to consider whether our updated harbor management plan should contemplate the possibility that looking forward 20 years or 25 years, whether we need to be contemplating that some fraction of the boats in Southport Harbor might be then relying on electric motors and then charging for those electric motors, and thinking about how that would work rather than the diesel or gas engine propulsion that we have today. To update the plan document in 2022, this year, we don't need to be certain that the transition to electric propulsion is going to occur, or even what charging infrastructure would be necessary. All we have to do now is think about whether it should be noted among the goals and objectives in Chapter 5, or whether it should be considered as a general management recommendation in Chapter 6 of the Harbor Management Plan as we update it. Today, of course, the 27-year-old plan says nothing about propulsion or auxiliary propulsion for sailboats or primary propulsion for powerboats. But you can, as we're about to hear, that may be changing. So today we're fortunate to have David DeQuincio, who's the chief engineer at Annapolis Hybrid Marine in Annapolis, Maryland, on the line with us to give us an industry expert's view on the current status of electric propulsion in recreational marine, and also his thoughts about how that may potentially grow in the next 20 years. And he even has given some initial thought looking at the presentation that Jeff put together about past, present, and future of our harbor, about addressing the special challenge of our harbor where we have many moorings but few town docks, only one. And how would we manage charging infrastructure given that reality? So he'll share his thoughts about that as well. David's interest in electric sailboat propulsion was spurred by some repeated diesel engine problems that he and his wife Sally had while they were doing a cruise in the Bahamas in the year 2000. And emerging from that, he started to think about electric propulsion, which his electrical engineering degree and background equipped him for. He began looking at options back then, 22 years ago, and he reports that the options back then were either unproven or very expensive. But as he's about to talk to us about, the world has changed, and he's going to give us a little bit of a perspective about where things are today, where things may be going, and what the implications are for charging. So with that, David, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. We'll let you talk to us for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for everybody to get to ask you some questions. David?
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Loud and
great.
clear.
All right, great. In addition to the materials that you already have, I just sent Jack for follow-up distribution just a set of bullet points. In 10 minutes, I can't go too far down into the weeds, but I gave some thought in the past couple of days to what are the key points that I want to try to get across. And I think I can do that in 10 minutes and leave plenty of time for questions. So my comments are basically put into three categories. First category is an overview, big picture situation. And next category, I call it why is this happening, which is more about the customer perspective on things and other industry things that are accelerating this whole process. And then the third section, which would be the most relevant to you, is what should marina owners and operators expect? So we'll begin with the overview. The first thing I really want to make sure you come away with this conversation with is that things are moving very, very quickly now. After years of slow uphill climbing, advocacy against a lot of skepticism, things are moving rapidly. And a data point that I can give you in support of that is, I do the work I do in the marine world as a part-time side gig. I still have my engineering role in the data center industry, which I've been in for many years, and it's full time for my wife, and we have in orbit various people that help us on an hourly basis. So we're not a large company. I like to say we're the small company that's done big things. And in 2019. We finished the year with about $225K in revenues, and we finished 2021 with just shy of $700K. So that's basically a tripling of our revenue in just that short time, and despite the pandemic. And so things are moving very, very quickly. We now cannot keep up with all the leads and inquiries we're receiving. We've been in business for 12 years, and I can remember times when 3 and 4 weeks would go by and we wouldn't hear from a soul. So what's driving this? The first thing I want you to understand is it's not the boat builders. It's not a top-down phenomenon. It's very much a bottom-up phenomenon. And in the course of going about our business here, we have met people all over the place with all types of boats who have cobbled their own systems together with parts that they have hunted down online. We also have heard stories of people waving cashier's checks, bank checks, in front of boat builders, major boat builders for, say, 43-foot catamarans, waving a $700,000 check in front of them saying, "I want electric," and the builder saying no. And then they say, "Well, can I have a catamaran with no engines in it?" No. You have to buy the catamaran with the diesel engines. You have to take them out yourself and put in electric if that's what you want. So we have outright opposition from major boat builders still, but we have evidence that things will be changing, and they will have to get with the program whether they want to or not. The other thing that is going to be very, very pertinent for your situation is that unlike cars, you already know that boats vary a lot from one type to the next, but the thing that's been a revelation to us is just how different the uses are from one person to the next. So we have done inboard conversions for quite a few sailboats in the 27 to 32-foot range. That's been a sweet spot of ours, including some sister ships. But what we have, the systems we've designed and delivered for one customer of a boat in that same size range has been very different for others based on what they tell us about how they're going to go boating. We have day sailors. They motor for an hour, go sailing, they motor back, and they'd like to have 2 hours in reserve. We do that without any onboard generation now. Charge at the dock with standard household plug-in situations. And then we have liveaboards who are fully independent with DC generators of various kinds. So of course, those folks spend more money. They have more complicated systems. They have larger batteries, more powerful motors, etc. So you will see, because you'll begin to see more and more people with different types of electric systems for different types of boat uses. You'll be seeing different types of charging requirements. The other thing that's happening very rapidly is that both the motors and the batteries and the charging equipment and the generators are all becoming available in the larger sizes. So to give you a reference point there, those 27 to 30-foot sailboats that I've mentioned previously, we have been able to take good care of them with motors in the 5,000 to 7,000 watt range. We're now actively in negotiations with a German company to represent them with their 50 kilowatt motor. What we like about this particular motor is that it operates at 48 volts. There are other electric options now in very high power levels that also require higher voltages than 48. So that will allow us to replace diesels as large as 125, 130 horsepower. And so as the technology has advanced, so has interest from the venture capital and investment community. One of the companies that we have done very well with lately is ePropulsion. They are primarily an outboard motor company, but just announced their first entry into the inboard market. That company was started by students in Hong Kong in 2009. They just now secured the next round of funding in the U.S. equivalent of about $15 million. Meanwhile, a company out on the West Coast, Pacific Northwest area called Pure Watercraft, just closed a $150 million deal with GM. They are focused on higher power outboards in the 100, 150, 200 horsepower equivalent range. And obviously they're addressing the powerboat market. So with that kind of money coming in, now we can have production, manufacturing at scale, and all the other, benefits that come with that versus the kind of craft build that has kept prices higher. So that completes the overview. Moving into why is this happening? What do customers tell us? What do we hear? Bottom line is customers love quiet, stink-free boating. And to give you an idea there, I'll compare it to a recent purchase of ours. Our dishwasher died 2 years ago, and we bought a new one. We bought a nice Bosch dishwasher, and it was more, not the cheapest one out there, but it's a great dishwasher. It's very reliable. It's quiet, and I appreciate its convenience. But would I describe it as transformational? Would I describe it as life-changing? Would I describe it as a near religious experience to have this dishwasher? No, I like the dishwasher. But those descriptions, those are all honest to God, actual descriptions that customers have told us about life with electric propulsion. We haven't heard orgasmic yet, but just wait, we probably will. So once people get a taste of it, they love it, and customers tell us they're never going back. We also have unexpected help with regard to outboards from the corn lobby out in the Midwest. So by virtue of their pressing for ethanol to be added to gasoline, small gas outboard motors are having a terrible time with the ethanol, and so the owners of these gas outboards are having really serious problems. We keep hearing start problems and high maintenance, unreliability, and all of that. So thanks to the corn lobbyists for helping grow our outboard business. And then what we consistently see in the sailboat market and the low-speed powerboat market with diesels, I know from my engineering practice outside of marine that diesels love being loaded at or near full load, at or near most of the time, or all the time. And so, for example, in freight rail, long-haul freight rail, they get 50,000 hours out of a diesel. Then the locomotive goes into heavy overhaul, comes out, they get another 50,000 hours, and they may do that 3 or 4 times before that engine is then sold off to a third party that might lease it to a short line or something like that. But what do we hear from sailboat owners? Oh, I got 5,000-6,000 hours out of a diesel. I promise you, if Union Pacific Railroad only got 5,000 or 6,000 hours out of their diesels in their locomotives, they'd be out of business. So the problem comes down to loading. We don't in sailboats load engines enough to get them to burn fuel efficiently and to clear their exhaust channels completely. I could go into more detail about that, but I don't really have time. Here's another data point that I found surprising going back to the outboards. One of the things we have learned a lot about is shoulder injury, something I never expected, but a lot of our customers tell us they've either injured their shoulders pulling on the start cables for gas outboards, or they injured their shoulders doing something else, and now they can't pull the gas outboard start cord. Okay, now what does all this mean for marina owners and operators? Well, number one, it's going to mean higher electricity bills. Even if you get 50, 60 people routinely charging electric outboard batteries on your system, you'll be able to see the uptick from that. And as this snowball heads down the hill, I think marinas that want to keep boat owners that are converting to electric and don't want to tell them they have to go elsewhere, we'll have to look at investing in higher capacity electric service installations. That's a long lead thing where you have to hire an engineering firm and go through a whole process with the electric utility. And so I commend all of you for even inviting me, for even thinking about this now, because this way it won't be a fire drill for you, whereas it might be for people who don't plan ahead. You'll also experience a wide range of requests for different types of charging. So the electric outboards we sell, the 1 kilowatt model being the most popular, that one plugs into a standard outlet with looks like a laptop brick, and that battery is 1,276 watt hours. That's the measure of how much energy it stores. And it typically, from a full discharge, takes about 5.5 hours to fully recharge. And there's a faster charge option, which is a 400-watt charger that will charge that battery in about 2 hours. So that's if that was the only thing happening, that wouldn't be too hard to accommodate. But the 50-kilowatt motor I mentioned is going to need at least a 1,000 amp hour times 50 volts for round numbers is a 50,000 watt hour battery at a minimum. And the more powerful electric outboards that are coming down the pike, their batteries will be in the 100, 150, maybe even 200,000 watt hour sizes. So that, when you get to that level, now you're talking a charging station like you would see at a parking garage or something like that. And that prompts a question of down the road, will you be able to service 3 dozen electric boats in your marina that need, honest to God, charging station, electric vehicle charging station capability? And in my conversations with Jacob, I mentioned to him an idea that I had that started percolating in my head years ago about what I call a charge barge that would be able to go around and service boats like a pump-out boat, only instead of getting rid of waste, it will be delivering electricity. And that is it's still a concept. I don't have any specs written. I have just a general idea in my head of what that would look like, but that might be a viable alternative to trying to create a place. Electric charging takes longer. It's the nature of the beast than dumping a fluid into a tank that we do now for diesel and gasoline. So congestion at a centralized charging dock could be a real issue. And then there will be needs to train staff. When we're handling large movements of electrical energy, there are increased risks, and people need to be properly trained in terms of how to spot problems and take appropriate action. So that completes the prepared remarks. Hopefully I stayed reasonably within the time frame.
Great. We've looked at some of the recent news things, and folks in the room here were looking at some articles, including one showing that Brunswick Marine, which owns Mercury Engines, is going to be introducing a outboard engine this year and 3 more next year that are electric powered. So it's not just the Europeans now that are going to be introducing it. That's in the sort of powerboat world. And it'll be interesting to see how this boat goes into repowering challenges for our sailboaters, as well as people who buy new sailboats that are electrically powered going forward. Harbormaster Claire has your first question.
David, I had a question because I read one of the articles we had talked about, for a sailboat, 5 knot speed, 25 to 50 hours on a battery, which is quite a big range. Looking at the boats in our harbor, we don't have dockage for more than a couple of the 100-plus boats. But for those, the main use of the sailboats, from the 20s to the 40s, are men and women who go out, once, maybe twice a week. Given the nature of our harbor, we don't motor very far. We have the motor on 15 minutes, maybe 20, pop the sails up, go for a race, go cruising, turn around 3-4 hours later for 15, 20 minutes and have the engines on. Using that kind of a draw on an electric sailboat engine, can solar panels during the week give you enough of a charge that we don't have to really accommodate with a charging station?
Unlikely. Solar does have, it's a great question, solar does have a role to play in keeping batteries float charged and otherwise preventing batteries from flatlining. But unless, now a catamaran with a lot of real estate for panels, it's possible. But on most monohulls in that size range, just to give you a data point, your typical 2x4 foot solar panel, so that's 8 square feet, is good. Even the best ones today are good for at most 150 watts, and that's only in full sun. And yes, the newer panels are better at converting indirect sunlight, at a 35 and even 40 degree angle to perpendicular to usable energy. But if you recall in my remarks, I described 5,000 watt, 6,000 watt, 7,000 watt motors. Now they may not operate them flat out just to leave the harbor, but they still might need 2,000, 2,500 watts, maybe 3,000 watts for a half an hour. And now we have to try to replace that energy with maybe 2 or 3 panels at 150 watts each. So it's a stretch. But what those types of customers could do if they're on moorings is they can dinghy out a Honda portable and run a Honda portable for an hour. And that's one way to take care of them. Yes, we're trying to get reduce fossil fuel use, trying to get gasoline off the boat. But you wouldn't likely have to refuel the Honda, and those are lightweight, inexpensive. So that's so solar can. I guess the short answer is solar can help those folks in that situation, but I don't think it can reliably do the whole job.
So David, talk about lithium batteries and the exploding batteries or the fires that can't be put out concern that some folks have asked us about.
Sure, that's a fair question. When you hear the phrase lithium battery, be aware that we're talking about 137 odd different chemical variants, and that number is going to grow. But those variants all break down into 6 broad categories. They're members of what you might call the 6 clans or the 6 tribes of lithium battery. And the fires that you see in the news are mostly involving the clan called NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt, which is among the lightest weight. So that variant has high power density, higher than others, and that's why it's preferred, particularly in the electric vehicle world. Although there's already a shift with some recent improvements in one of the other variants, or one of the other clans. There's a shift possibly away from NMC. Again, in a very bottom-up versus top-down way, the sailing and boat owning, recreational boat owning community has informally and kind of spontaneously done its own mass experiment with early adopters going forward with their own lithium battery projects, and some of them are not executed very well. They're DIY. But the result of all that is a convergence of opinion in marine. which now has the blessing of some of the people involved with ABYC and the Coast Guard, that the clan called lithium iron phosphate is the one that is best suited for marine. These are heavier than NMC. They are more tolerant of vibration and temperature swings and pressure changes and things like that, but they still have the characteristics that we love about lithium batteries. And it is a true statement that the advancement and ramp up of manufacturing of lithium iron phosphate has gated us open in terms of opening up electric propulsion opportunities to people that either couldn't afford them or couldn't afford what they really needed for their boat use. Keep in mind, any engineered system of any kind can cause injury and damage if it's not properly applied, and that's true even of lead acid batteries. So the industry has been on a learning curve. We've been on a learning curve with it, and compared to what was available when we first started 12 years ago to what's available now, it's easier to properly configure a safe lithium iron phosphate battery system. So there have been marine lithium battery fires. Everyone that I have personally looked into had some kind of engineering issue or just misoperation. One case that got a lot of notoriety was a large catamaran, professionally captained, that burned to the waterline down in the islands, or I think some far down in the island chain. And the boat had been struck by lightning, and the skipper figured, well, he surveyed the damage. He saw that the external BMS box, that's the brain that manages the charging of lithium, of the lithium cells, was completely fried, completely destroyed by the strike, but the batteries looked okay. And he turned on the charger because the charger hadn't been damaged by the lightning strike. And he just let the charger run free, and it overcharged the batteries, and that started the fire. That was years ago, and people now generally understand that if you have a compromised BMS, that you shouldn't try to charge a lithium battery. So the systems we do have built-in protection against that sort of thing. If the BMS isn't there, then the BMS is compromised, then we gate off the charging. So the problem, it's not an insignificant problem, but it is, to us, it is now a solved problem, and we don't think lithium iron phosphate is any more dangerous than any other kind of battery, and any kind of battery applied will give you problems.
All right. David, I think we're about out of time for today. I appreciate very much you spending time and giving us an introduction to electrification. And again, so we're updating our plan, and we have to have an eye towards 20 years from now and imagining what people will be doing with their boating and what commissioners, long after we're gone, will be dealing with is supporting those boaters. So thank you very much for being with us today.
All right. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Kim? Kim? We lost her.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you, yes.
I'm wondering if any of the commissioners have any thoughts about mentioning electrification in the plan.
I would like.
Hi, it's Sam Cargill. I think obviously we would, but the infrastructure decisions are going to be made by individual marinas and what the need is, et cetera. Maybe some sort of narrative about the coming and the changing and the transformation of the technology. Because most of the boats, of those sort of smaller boats, I guess, and of course, I'm out of my league here. I know you can take your battery with you out of your outboard and bring it home and plug it into your garage. I mean, obviously that may change if some of the larger boats over 50 feet, and that's not necessarily a Southport an ideal place for sort of heavy electrification. I just throw that out, but I do think there must be some sort of mention in there. And the rules and regs are, if that's if the harbor management plan is the Constitution, we have the rules and regs to make changes like amendments to that Constitution. So that's all I'm going to say. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I was going to say, I think it would be valuable to consider the adoption rate over the next 2 to 5 years. I mean, I think some of the benefits are very obvious, but there's a lot of disadvantages as well. And, we've seen the automotive industry grow by leaps and bounds. I think that's what's driving it. But certainly, I think there would be value in an analysis of the adoption rate over the next 2, 5, and 10 years.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything that he said that would encourage the idea of a public charging station for our harbor.
Yeah, I mean, the issue, like Sam said, if it's going to be just our center console fishermen with extractable batteries, they may weigh 20 pounds, but they take them home and charge them, or they swap one battery for another one. That doesn't really affect our infrastructure stuff. The problem will be if the larger boats do, either new larger boats come in that were built in 20 years with electric propulsion systems, or if somebody wants to do a repower instead of with another diesel to one of these European-based USA charging electric motor systems. So, and I don't know. And I don't know how it happens. And maybe it just won't happen in Southport because they're not at slips, most of those folks.
They're not going to buy those boats because
maybe
they can't charge those boats.
Right, unless they happen to be at a slip somewhere. Right.
I don't think we should have to try and predict what's going to happen 20 years from now.
Yeah, I guess my feeling is we could just put a placeholder in our harbor management plan to be on the lookout for this issue and think about if there are any implications, because this is our chance, and it may be years before people do another shot at thinking about what could happen in the future. I don't know. I was intrigued that Brunswick Corporation, with all those boat manufacturers that they own, is working on multiple engines for power boats that are going to be electric next year. So it may happen quicker than we were thinking if that takes hold.
If you look at some commercial.
Well, I'm even thinking about some of the buildings in town that now have solar panels. I mean, that's relatively new way to generate power, and I mean, there are many of them in many of those places in town. So who knows in 20 years whether the solar panel industry will have also expanded so that we have a different a way to charge those batteries that now isn't even contemplated.
Yes, please.
Hi, John Short.
John Short, you may have to get a little closer to the microphone for those folks to hear.
There's no provision right now in Southport Harbor for fueling up your boat. I mean, there's no diesel pump there.
Yes, there is.
There is?
Where? There is.
Pequot has an agreement with the town but it's required to be available to the public.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why would you think about, putting a charging dock or something?
Yeah, I think our feeling was that electrification, even with sophisticated or growth in technology, is going to take longer than it takes for somebody to sit at the fuel dock at Pequot. And so that's more than we could ask Pequot to do in terms of supporting the 100 boats in the harbor. So then what is sort of the solution? So that's what we're dealing with. And there is one town dock, but it's not very big. And so that led to our guest actually thinking maybe there's a barge, sort of a movable dock, or even maybe there's a floating dock that's got undersea cabling to charging stations potentially in the future. But I think that places like our own marina on the other end of town is a more likely place for electrification to start.
What I was saying before is that if you look at some commercial marinas now, they're primarily dry sailing all their power boats, and they're stacked, 6 high, and when you're going to use your boat, they get a forklift and they move it that'd be a perfect place to have electric boats because they won't be charged very easily. But
right.
Southport Harbor,
not easy. All right, sounds like there's openness to having a placeholder TBD, and we'll watch what happens in years to come. But at least there's something in the plan that says this is something to watch.
Excellent. I think that's a great idea, and who knows how it will all turn out in 20 years' time when the plan gets updated again.
Just hope I'm around to see it.
Right. I hope we're all around to see it. Absolutely. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay, Mr. LeClaire, the Harbormaster's report.
Thank you. Just to update you a little bit, virtually all of the permits have been issued with the paperwork coming in. I think we are missing 3 right now out of 150 permits missing data, which we will be getting soon. We are working on the docked vessels, not only at Pequot, but at the private docks, and we're getting them into the system, getting the information we need on those, safe boating certificates, registrations, insurance. We have that database. North Anchorage is filling up. I'm coordinating with the Yacht Club, what we'll be getting from them. As you know, they're maintaining the records on that this year and will provide us with a spreadsheet list of the 50 individuals who have vessels, their names of vessels, etc. Perry Green, we are working with the town to try to straighten out some issues regarding that location. As you know, the Harbor Management Commission has jurisdiction over several of those, which we've issued permits for. The town has been trying to fill theirs. They're going through their list to put vessels in. I got a partial list from them today. Interestingly, one of the boats on their list already gets a permit from us, the Harbor Management Commission. So we have to get that straightened out with him.
Yeah.
And he has a bunch of vacancies. And issues come up as to the cost, what is being paid for there. It looks like they were charging $80, which we are getting $80 per each of their moorings, and nothing for the general fee, permit fee, right? So I don't know when you want to talk about that. That's something that we're looking into, and the commission has, Kim and Jack have started to look at, see if we can understand that a little bit better. Not the fees we charge; these are for the ones the town has out there. Of course, we have the blessing of the fleet coming up in June. When the report comes out, we can do a mass email to everyone, sending them a copy of the annual report, both North Anchorage docked vessels and the moorings that we manage. My little dinghy's been in the water for 3 weeks now, puttering around the harbor. It's probably the smallest Harbormaster vessel in the entire state, I would expect, but it's pretty cool looking. It's nice to have
Still scary.
Still scary. A 1963 whaler is looking pretty good. I spent the winter painting the inside and outside and stripping the mahogany, and you wouldn't recognize it. It doesn't look like it used to. It's spruced up a little bit, make us all proud. But it's nice because I've been going around on the weekends, talking to folks, bumping into folks, the PR, just getting to know folks. So it's all good.
That's great.
Yep. And that's, unless you have any questions, everything seems under control right now.
Any questions for the Harbormaster, commissioners? So, Brian, through online moorings, we will be able to distribute the annual report that Jeff has worked so hard on to everyone, correct? Everyone who's got a boat in the harbor.
Yeah, I don't think I could send it as an attachment, but what we can do is put it on the town website and send the URL, if that's the right word, right in my message. Click here for the annual report. People can click and open it into another browser window, so they get to see the pictures in color and read it, enlarge it on their iPads, their laptops, print it if they want to. I think it's a good way to get information out to them.
Absolutely, yeah.
We have anything to send out. And also, just to let you know, there's been a delay on that buoy, the water monitoring buoy. I've heard nothing further. I know there was a supply chain issue getting that out there. So I'll let you know when that gets put out. The day mark number 11, I believe, it's 11 on the rock pile. That's 11 coming out. Right. Yeah, one of the 3x3 signs fell off a couple of days ago. So if you're coming in heading north, there's no reflective green sign and no number on it. So we notified the Coast Guard, and they were going to send a crew out. This is as of Thursday. When the yacht club alerted me, they noticed it when they were out there that day. So we called the Coast Guard right away. They were going to take care of that. And the federal government was out there measuring the channel, and we just got some...
The Army Corps?
The Army Corps, was out there for about a week with their vessel, taking their measurements, soundings, whatever they were doing. And they've generated some maps charts, maps, drawings that we've printed out
right.
that are here on the table now to look at.
Excellent. Okay, any questions for the Harbormaster? Commissioners, members of the public, anybody questions for the Harbormaster? Okay, moving right along. The next item on the agenda is the structures, dredging, and fill application submitted by RACE to DEEP. And for those of you who, I hope all of you took a look at it, it incorporates the letters that both the Shellfish Commission and we sent to RACE to be included in the initial application that RACE sent on to DEEP, the letters that we did after the tour in January. And if you looked at this part of the application, you'll notice, for example, that it's anticipated that the path around Kenzie Point, as well as the shellfish beds, may be disrupted for a couple of months while the folks put the pilings in and begin to build the dock. And I know that there's been some concern. I've heard some concern from folks down at Town Hall that this could be a significant interruption of folks' ability to enjoy the waters in and around Kenzie Point. So I'm just wondering what the commissioners and Mr. Short is delighted that he's with us today. Give us his perspective. What your thinking is, current thinking about that disruption and the plans to move forward with this dock.
What are the Shellfish
So the
Commission?
Shellfish Commission has many concerns on the dock, obviously. It does extend into our recreational shellfish bed. Not a huge portion of it, but it does take up part of our bed. As for the construction, we did ask in our response to DEEP that work be done in the off months, say between November and March or so, which there's less people shellfishing. If there is material stirred up from what they're doing there, they're going to remove old pilings, which is going to bring up a lot of that old sediment there has bacteria in it that will be released from that. So we preferred that it was done in off time, especially not during the oyster spawning season or the clam spawning season, which starts July 1st and ends mid-September. Oysters can spawn at any time when the water is 70 degrees. So I don't know if anything was approved or not, but we really would like that to happen.
Sure.
Jack, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Did you submit the shellfish consultation form with a negative finding?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So all that's happened now is RACE has just submitted their application. So no decision has been made as to whether to approve it or not. So what we wrote in our letter was that we reserve the right to comment. Well, first we could comment on the application, but also at such time as DEEP puts it out to public notice. And at that time, we could also request a public hearing on it if there were still unresolved matters. But maybe one approach, I'm just thinking without thinking, is that now we know that it's been submitted to DEEP, is to request that someone from DEEP come down and make a site visit to look at the site of the project and in consultation with the Shellfish Commission and the Harbor Commission as part of their review. Now that's what I can think of now. And then, of course, we also had the question that's maybe not for this application is whether other property owners in the future might be able to also argue that they have a right to have access to navigable water with the structure, and that the subdivision approval doesn't
include that, right?
So I don't know, one thought might be to ask DEEP to conduct a site visit as part of their evaluation of the application.
We didn't know at the time that we responded that they were contemplating several months of construction, and so I would think that our commission would also share the Shellfish Commission's thinking about off-season, but for different reasons. There'd be less people trying to traverse Kensey Point in the middle of the winter than there would be in the heat of the season.
I think so.
Right. Although remember, our site visit was right around New Year's, and there were a fair number of people down there walking at low tide, walking around the point.
There clearly were, but they didn't talk to us about 2 months or 3 months of construction.
No. And I also have to wonder, they're saying that there's going to be barges out there as well as onshore equipment. Does that mean that the time limit for that equipment will be there for 2 months, or is that, they'll bring it in a week early and they'll leave a week later, and could the 2 months expand into something more interfering?
So the depth of the water there at low tide is 1 foot or 18 inches.
Right.
We're just going to have to move in and out with tides. I think we could possibly go to DEEP and say the barge cannot sit on the bottom due to it being a recreational shellfish bed and part of our national bed with much oyster restoration work going on there. So we probably would have to move the barge in and out of the harbor or some of the harbor.
Right.
The work of the pilings and that, they can get them in pretty quick. They have to remove the old pilings that are there. I think that's what the barge work comes in. I'm not sure with whatever's going on land is going to need a barge or not. But,
and we clearly can't store or berth their barge in the harbor during boat season.
Right.
They're tying up to one of our docks, or I doubt Pequot's going to let them tie up to their dock for 2 months in the summer. So that's another issue.
I don't know if a barge can be parked offshore or if that's safe, but most likely it's got to go to a harbor. So if they can't get to the harbor, they have to.
They're going to need access for their own boat to get to the barge, and it's a big operation usually. Yeah.
And they're going to be moving an awful lot of rocks around. I mean, are there going to be piles of rocks that they want to get rid of, and how is that going to? Is that within the 2 months, or is that what does that look like? So Jeff, I think that's a good idea to invite DEEP to come on down.
In addition to expressing the comments we just heard about the time of year and potential impacts and the use of barges, and we could transmit to them the comments we've discussed today, and also request that they conduct a site visit with representatives of the 2 commissions.
I think we should, and I'm wondering if there's anything else that the Shellfish Commission would like us to include in our letter, so that the DEEP hears it twice instead of once. If we just describe the off season as a better time to do the work, is there anything else we should be thinking about from a shellfish perspective?
So I'm not going to lie, is that I didn't plagiarize your letter, but I used your letter as a guideline to write our letter.
Good.
Because it's not really what I do. So I needed some background, and I went through your letter. I used some of the material in the letter, which was, basic facts and things like that, and then I added all our concerns.
Mm-hmm.
So
excellent. Glad to be of help. I mean, this is important, and if any of us have good arguments, this is the time to share them and to let DEEP know what they are.
Certainly sounds like it will be a substantial dock.
Yes.
Compared to just a normal structure.
Our main concern as the Shellfish Commission was the power boats. It's applied as a paddlecraft dock, but we submitted questions to their race and the lawyer, and they came back with, well, there will be power boats going to and from the dock. And so we had a concern that the boats may be 20-footers center consoles in the beginning, but when they get tired of going out to the boat that's anchored far out, will they start applying for more permits, maybe for a possible dredging? I know everyone says it's impossible, but it's not when you're talking about the amount of money that's behind this project. So
we did make it clear to them when they met with us that the rules and procedures of the Harbor Management Commission do not allow those waters to have a mooring place there in the harbor management area. And so if they're using that dock to access something further out in the water, that thing is going to be at anchor. It's not going to be sitting on a mooring because...
Yeah, the Harbor Management Commission has, if you look online, they have an area of jurisdiction,
right,
and it includes that whole area outside, so they cannot put mooring.
Right, our rules are clear that those open waters are not a place. All the moorings have to be owned by the town, and the town's not interested in spending the town's money and putting it in open water like that, So that means that they're going to use it as an access thing. We told them that it's going to be something that's anchored. It's not going to be something
A few years back there's some moorings off of Fairfield Beach. And we did a little research and found that none of those had permits for that.
Well, that's something new. When I got appointed in the fall, the governor named me Harbormaster for both Southport and Fairfield with the instructions as Fairfield Harbormaster to find those moorings. And I permitted one already off of Fairfield Beach as to notify everyone who has a mooring they need to get a permit for that mooring. They can't just throw a mooring anywhere.
The eastern edge of our harbor management area is in the area where this subject property is, and we identified that the waters right off of the property that's in this application were within the harbor management area. So, but the area that you're describing is to the east of the harbor management area.
Our worst fear is that there's going to be, 6 or 7 properties there, is that they all decide to get a mooring.
Or to get a dock.
There'll be 5 waterfront properties.
5
in the subdivision.
And that they use this one dock as a spot where they're going back and forth to moorings and create.
Yeah, not within, to the east of that, it could be possible.
They'd have to go around 22, the red buoy there.
That red buoy there.
And that's kind of the corner. They'd have to get around the buoy heading.
Not right offshore that property.
That area, doesn't bother us.
It's interesting because the applicant also told us that this dock is only for that property owner. It wouldn't be a shared dock.
Yeah, that's what we heard, right?
Whether they stick to that, and so then you have a situation where you have 4 other waterfront homes who can't get a mooring because of our regulation and are not permitted to have a dock because of the subdivision requirement, and I can imagine that might be discussed in the future.
Well, it's a private dock, but it could be easily shared. I could let you come to my dock, as you know. That's the risk.
There were going to be family members in those houses?
That's what our understanding was when they came in.
No.
Yeah, we didn't hear that.
Okay.
There's going to be new construction as well, correct?
Yeah. Building a whole bunch of houses.
A whole bunch of houses.
7 lots and 5 on the water.
Subdivided, they're not doing part of a condo or anything.
No.
So one last thing, Jeff, you were at the meeting of the Shellfish Commissioners. There's a case going on in Greenwich right now where someone is going to build a dock, and there's a conservation easement on the waterfront. And this piece of property also has you're going to build it 1 foot from the mean high water mark and then step onto this dock because they still have
They already built that dock. That's the subject of the court case.
This is the one that's not connected to the...
It's not connected to the land to get around the local zoning ordinance.
Right.
And so you could argue if the DEEP approved that in one town, why couldn't they approve a similar structure in...
Dock not connected to land, right?
Dock not connected by land.
Even if it is connected to land, I just had a case with this. The zoning doesn't have jurisdiction for the parts that don't sit on land, sit on the water. For instance, if you go to New London, Electric Boat is the new sub-construction facility I was involved with in the city. And they have jurisdiction over the small section on the land, but they built a massive structure on pilings on the river, and that's not subject to zoning. That's deep and other, but it's not your zoning because it's not on land. It's not property. It's an interesting... Yeah, great.
So, Jeff, do you think it's possible for DEEP to come in and say to us at some point, you have to allow people to put in an additional dock and or moorings out there? The littoral water override our decision and our jurisdiction?
Well, you remember that this is our issue, that the court has decided, subject to appeal, that we have no authority to make even comments to DEEP. And how that plays out in the future, and also with respect to the harbor management plan, is a big issue affecting everything we do now. But that doesn't mean we can't now go ahead with the understanding that our recommendations are binding, unless DEEP shows cause otherwise.
Okay.
But we can certainly write this letter now to DEEP with a copy to the Shellfish Commission.
Absolutely, I think we should.
Expressing these concerns and asking DEEP to conduct a site visit.
Yeah. Good idea. Commissioners, any other thoughts? Okay, Jeff. Well, let's proceed with that letter and inviting DEEP to come on down and take a look, walk around down there.
That would be Mr. Clark, who visited when we talked about the dredging project and also the Perry Green bulkhead.
Right.
And I think he'd be agreeable to that.
Right. Good. And John will let you know when they're coming, and you can join us.
I will.
Okay. Good.
One question.
Good.
You haven't seen the letter that we submitted? Can I email it to someone?
Probably to Kim would be best.
Can you email?
Can you CC me, please?
Oh, are you still the same email? Call him. I'm going to call him. Right. Send it to you.
Thank you.
And then you can forward it out?
Whatever you want.
Brian's going to call in now. He has to go drive, so he's going to be on my phone.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay, moving right along to old business. Lower Wharf, Mr. Stedman.
All right, well, I'm negligent here. I haven't finished my, if you call it, accounting of the status of the grant to request that the town agree to our repurposing of it, and I hope to have that finished by Friday. I have been talking with Mr. Salvatore, as again, the Port Authority has no issues with this, but in the course of discussing this, he's asked if we have other projects that we might be interested in pursuing with this next round of grants from the SHIP program. So talk about the progress we're making on the plan and on the Lower Wharf project, but is there anything else that we might want to request funding for? And I asked the engineering department, but they think that they're okay with the funds that they have for the Perry Green bulkhead. But is there anything else? Not just construction. Because to get funds for construction, we'd have to have a permit in place to do it. But there's also money available for studying feasibility of different things, futures of opportunities in the harbor. So we have.
Well, does the Shellfish? We think the Shellfish Commission would have anything. The Conservation Commission have anything that we could.
I think we should talk. I also brought up the possibility of funds from the SHIP program that would help us mitigate the impact on the piping plover.
Great idea.
Because the Corps of Engineers, and we can talk about it in a minute, have indicated that they're not going to spend money. They're only going to spend their money on the dredging itself, not on the mitigation of creating new bird habitat, which they don't think you have to do anyway. But that's another possibility if we need the town to help us move sand to the area that we're going to talk about in a minute. But
that's a great idea.
It may not be, well, it's just an idea now, Kim.
Okay.
Whether that
should we officially chat with Conservation and?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I talked with engineering about it because the two dredging projects that the Public Works did, those projects were done with town personnel and rental equipment to move sand or excavate sand and move it along the beach with the trucks. Mr. Hurley has told me that now the town policy is not to have crew do that sort of work, but rather to contract it with an outside entity. So between now and the next meeting, we'll certainly investigate this opportunity. And when the fellow was talking about the electric charging station, the first thing I thought about is there anything that we need to do to investigate the future feasibility of that, which is such a new idea. But then, as you talked about, it's in the future, and it will develop over time.
Yeah, actually, Lake Tahoe has the first one I've heard about of a high, sort of a level 2 or supercharger type charging station because they have electric boats operating on that lake. But I think we may be some years away from
complicate things that what we're doing. And I also might mention that Mr. Engborg was good enough to take me out in the yacht club's boat so I could take photographs of the Perry Green, or not the Perry Green, the Lower Wharf Pier, which is what we're saying is our priority for replacing.
Right.
And we also took some photos of the sandbar as well. So
well, I'm wondering if there's, if the Lower Wharf, we're going to replace the structures there, they're going to, fix the stone wall. The concrete along the edge is in pretty bad shape in some places, and I believe there's power there. Is that perhaps something that we just want, as we're fixing up the Lower Wharf, is that something we want to maybe think about, making sure that there's power out there?
The power, John, remember this years ago. I think that was set up there to power the Shellfish Commission's upweller facility that we had in that North Pier, which was to circulate water and grow seed clams or seed oysters to more maturity before putting them out. But it didn't work out. It was too difficult to work with the upweller there to regularly mix the stuff. But that was one of the reasons for the power, I think, to extend it out there. But
it probably was for the pumps, yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry I didn't get the material yet for the finance people in the town hall. I hope to have that.
Well, that's okay. I mean, I don't think we can start that work anytime soon anyway. We're still going after the permit, so we're looking at, I think, probably fall before we can start.
Right. But we need to make the agreement to get race starting on the permit.
Yeah.
Work and to repurpose. But anyway, Kim, I can talk with you about that.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Jeff, sand management. Tell us about the Army Corps being on site.
The Harbormaster has left, and
he's going to be on my phone in a moment.
Yeah, I'm on the phone here.
Okay.
I'm here.
So the Corps of Engineers redirected its survey crew to come from Norwalk and Stamford instead of doing those to come to Southport because they have the money in the budget to dredge Southport. And then they can go back to their regular schedule. So we have that survey. We also, as you know, we visited the site, and we put together a presentation that we sent back to the Corps of Engineers, which is what we have on the board here. Would it be? I won't take very long if I could go through this.
Go ahead.
So
yeah.
We visited the site. When did we actually visit it? I'll go back. But we visited the site with the Corps of Engineers and with Mr. Bull from the Audubon's, Connecticut Audubon, specifically to look at piping plover habitat and where there might be opportunity to mitigate any impact on the existing habitat by the dredging project. So in this slide, of course, this is the area that we're talking about dredging, but there is some habitat identified as habitat for piping plover on this, we're calling it a sand spit. It's probably a more proper geologic term than a sandbar. So whatever we affect here in terms of piping plover habitat, we have to create that somewhere else. That's the understanding that we've been working along with. The Corps of Engineers thinks now that there's no really viable habitat, so that we shouldn't have to do anything. But that we'll have to deal with that. So this area over here, based on the site visit that Kim and I and Mr. Bull made, we'll see in a few minutes that this seems to be an area where we might be able to create new habitat. And the habitat is defined as a relatively level place without grass, a relatively open, level place with a mixture of pebbles and shell, because the pebbles and shell essentially camouflage the eggs of the birds. The birds don't bring a nest like a bird's nest in a tree. They survive by having the eggs look shell, not like eggs. So we look for those areas. Here's another view just to show what's to the east. I just will go through this quickly. And now we're getting into where is the habitat? And it's very interesting. All of these striations in the sand that show different levels of the water. And when we went out in the boat with Mr. Engborg, and it's quite actually very interesting visual impression. But this slope is very, very steep. So obviously the birds don't nest on the steep slope, and they don't nest. It's not a good habitat if they nest waterward of the storm tide, because then of course the eggs could be washed away by a storm. So we try to identify where the storm tide is and where the normal high tide line is. So this is just a crude sketch we did based on observations on the site, where the, I can't show this here, maybe I can. Based on observations on the site, where the storm tide line is the highest line of the vegetation along the shore, and where the high tide line seems to be. And here you can see it. This is what we based our crude estimates on. The rack line up here would seem to indicate the storm tide line, and the high tide line seems to be down here. So this area in here, and again with the expert opinion from Mr. Bull, would not be considered as really viable or important nesting habitat. It's the area, and this is an older picture. So just one moment. So this picture is from February 26th, but that was when we went out with the Corps of Engineers. This one is from 4, 5, 6 years ago, when we were posting these string fences to identify the area to be kept away from, or people should not. And that was a condition of the dredging permit back then. This is 2016, but we had several years afterwards that we had to do this. So the dredging was actually in 2014, and then every year during the nesting season, we went back out and put these string fences back out. So it was this area here, up in here, that was considered the viable nesting habitat. And here's another view from March of this year. That's when Kim and I and Mr. Bull were out there. So it's these areas in here, interspersed between the vegetation, that he would consider as viable nesting habitat, but he also considered it as low-grade habitat. That as far as we know, no birds have nested here since 2011. And Mr. Bull said he's been out there every year during the peak nesting season and has not seen anything. So we're asking him to put together a report that we would send to the Corps of Engineers as argument from the Corps' perspective that it's not necessary to worry about this area. And again, you can see the shells in the pebbles. And here's another view of the same. This is what we're talking about as far as viable nesting habitat. Then we walk down the beach, and this circled area, I'll go through that quickly, a little closer view. So we're walking down to that riprap area there. We thought that this area, if we had to do some mitigation, if we could essentially make a shelf of sand in here above the storm tide line, that would be an attractive location for birds to nest. I mean, it's not going to be a permanent location because over time it would get washed away. But it seems like, and Mr. Bull agreed, a place where we could create new habitat that would be, if we mixed it with shell and pebbles, attractive to the birds for nesting. Above the storm line, and we could make a relatively level spot there. And so again, to be continued, but that's what we're working on, and I'm hoping that Mr. Bull will make another trip with us this Friday, a site visit, if not Friday, next week, just to confirm that there's no nesting birds this spring. But that's where we are.
Thanks, Jeff. Commissioners, any questions? To be clear, I think that we're in the position where, even though the Army Corps of Engineers is suggesting we don't need mute, please.
Hey, Brian, can you put your phone on mute?
Yeah, it's Brian.
I think it's Brian's car phone.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Jack. To be clear, that the Army Corps of Engineers at this point is sounding like they don't think we need to provide mitigation for the piping plovers, but the Army Corps of Engineers has to go to DEEP to get the permit to do the dredging. And if DEEP says that we have to have some kind of habitat for the piping plovers, then obviously if we want to dredge, and DEEP are the guys who are telling us how and when and okaying it, we have to provide piping plover alternate habitat to satisfy DEEP. So,
and it's not just DEEP, it's also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, because they're responsible for protecting the birds that are on a federal list of, I don't know if they're still on the federal protected list in this area. And then the other matter that we're continuing to discuss, and I've talked about this with Mr. Carey at the Bureau of Aquaculture, is our whole proposal involves or is based on dredging that area of sand in the channel with the Corps of Engineers' own dredge, and then taking it a short distance offshore and dispersing it for the purpose of doing a pilot project to see if we can enhance oyster habitat. DEEP has expressed a concern about that the first choice should be to use the sand for beach nourishment. We're making the argument that there's a much greater environmental benefit to our proposal than there is to using it for beach nourishment. And Mr. Carey at the Bureau of Aquaculture said he would write a letter of support for that approach. And then maybe we can continue to discuss with the Shellfish Commission what the idea is, and hopefully get a letter of support from the Shellfish Commission.
Kim, I think Mr. Short was going to make a comment also.
Great.
The comment I was going to make was, if you do have to do some mitigation for the piping plover, we have thousands and thousands of pounds of oyster shell in Okeapolis. We're looking for shell. And then on this dredging, it does create a great opportunity for the Shellfish Commission to rework a portion of our natural bed that has filled up with slipper shell, or double deckers, whatever you call them. And that would be, clams and oysters would be harvested from that area and possibly brought to different areas, and then this sand brought in, and then a lot of shell put in the area to create an oyster bed, because the historically natural oyster bed out there, which is no longer because of things that have happened. So it's a great opportunity. Shellfish restoration.
Communicate with you as to what we're doing. But the immediate, well, besides arguing for why the offshore dispersal is the desired way, we have to advance this, our mitigation of piping plover habitat or not. And so Mr. Bull has been quite, and he's a recognized expert on this, but we have to influence the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the DEP division that deals with this. But we hope that this will work. We have the funds for it. And
so, Jeff, do you think that we could apply for a SHIP grant if DEEP insists that we use the sand for beach nourishment instead of taking it offshore? Could we apply for a SHIP grant, do you think, to get that part of the work done?
I don't think so, because that really eliminates our whole project, because it's all based in the cost that the Corps of Engineers has got is based on using their own dredge.
Yeah.
But if we were to need to move sand to create additional plover habitat, Mr. Salvatore at the Port Authority said that's something he would discuss with us.
Good. Okay.
But as far as funding the actual dredging project, that doesn't fit in with this grant because it's a federal responsibility.
Right.
But we'll still discuss all this.
Okay. Commissioners, any thoughts? Any questions?
Madam Chairwoman, it's Brian LeClaire. Just a question to Mr. Stedman. Do these? When do we expect we will actually get, bucket to mud, if you will, given these developments? Does this push us back another year, or any idea?
Well, we never had a time frame, and certainly we wouldn't be able to do it this fall. So I think if we're looking at some time in the dredging season of 2023.
Yeah, that's what the project manager told me when she was down in Southport. October 2023 was probably the earliest that they could begin the project, in part because the Currituck's getting repaired, and there's a huge backlog even with projects with money.
Yeah, and we haven't submitted the application yet, although the Corps has done what's known as an environmental assessment. So it's a federal project, and under the Federal Environmental Policy Act, they have to determine or address the environmental impacts of a federal project. And since this is maintaining something, they don't have to do an environmental impact statement, but they have to do an environmental assessment, which I think they've pretty much completed now. But we have to put the application together and submit that, and then there's going to be a period of time for DEEP to review it. And again, as Kim said, that the Currituck has been worked on or being repaired at the time. So I think our goal should be the October of 2023.
Thank you.
So it's not going to move fast, Brian, is the bottom line. not nearly as we'd like it to move.
No, and I was just curious if we could make 23 or if it's even further out, at this point.
Jeff is really working. It's a number one priority, and Jeff is spending more of his time working on that than any of the other things that we have going on. And he's in touch with those folks, all the Army Corps folks, and with the DEEP folks, and there's just it's just so much we can make happen. As far as I'm concerned, October 23 is the goal.
Okay, yeah, that's the most common question I think I've gotten as Harbormaster is when are they going to dredge? What's the progress? And I've explained there's great progress being made, but you don't just hire a company to start dredging. It's a multitude of permits, and we have a consultant, and that gives me more guidance as hopeful 2023 if all goes well. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners, public about the dredging? Super. Thanks, Jeff, for your efforts. Mooring Committee, Jack.
The Mooring Committee met on May 10th in this room, and the Harbormaster has covered the bulk of the discussions relative to moorings and mooring locations and Perry Green moorings. Kim, do you want me to introduce this?
Yes, go ahead.
The committee also discussed the job description for the Deputy Harbormaster role that we as a full commission had talked about. And it was the consensus of the Mooring Committee, which on that day included Kim and me, Bill Paragini, Jeff Warren, and the Harbormaster. Jeff Stedman was at that meeting as well. There was a consensus that we would recommend to the full commission that the description for the Deputy Harbormaster role simply say that the Deputy Harbormaster, at the direction of the Harbormaster, may be delegated any of the responsibilities outlined in the Harbormaster's job description, and then further that the required skills and experiences would be the same as those required of a Harbormaster. And I note that the agenda has a discussion about a selection committee later on, but so that is the recommendation to the full commission is that we just sort of append the responsibilities of the Harbormaster to the Deputy Harbormaster role as delegated by the Harbormaster at his discretion.
Thanks, Jack. Any comments from commissioners? How do you feel about that recommendation, those of you who were not there? Is there anybody, Sam, I guess, is the only one who wasn't there.
Yeah.
That makes me feel good.
What do you think?
Neutral.
Neutral? Do you accept the recommendation of the Mooring Committee?
Yes, I accept the recommendation of the Mooring Committee. Apologies for not being there.
Okay, all right. So I think that unless I hear anybody's had second thoughts or has any other ideas, I think that we have a terrific job description of the Harbormaster. We can post that in connection with our search for a Deputy Harbormaster, and then we would perhaps and hopefully compress the amount of time that we have to spend searching for someone because we already have a job description. So unless I hear any objections, I think that would be our plan moving forward. Okay, great. Plan update. Doug, are you on the line? Doug Metchick? Well, I'll do Doug's report. Since we last met, as you may remember, Doug had contacted a teacher at Ludlow High School and a couple of students who were interested in narrating the presentation that Jeff put together called Southport Harbor, Past, Present, and Future. And we had discussed with them some ideas about who would do the narration and what the format would be and some of the technical recording equipment that they had and that they thought would be useful to us. And unfortunately, we're so close to the end of the school year that the students no longer have the time to work with us to get that project done. So we are back to taking a look at that presentation and making some decisions about who we might want to get to narrate the various, what we're calling now, chapters of the presentation, and hopefully we'll be able to get back at least to the teacher, if not to both of the students, sometime in the fall, or come up with an alternative method of and group of folks to assist us in narrating that presentation. I know Don Hyman also is not available to us, but he at this meeting he has some suggestions about other presentations that have been turned into really very sophisticated multimedia experiences. So there are all sorts of options available to us. And I while this is a minor setback, I don't think we need to rethink our plan to narrate this presentation and make it available in smaller segments for folks who are interested in getting more information about the harbor. So any questions from anyone? Okay, great. Sam, Lower Wharf Memorial Bench.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to pay attention more often, Kim. Sorry. I've been at a lacrosse game I know it's been pins and needles for everyone, but Greens Farms Academy beat Rye Country Day 16-4.
Wow. Wow.
So,
very exciting.
Very exciting, of course. Sorry for the background noise if I had you off mute at the point. Just an update with regard to the Lower Wharf and in particular the Lower Wharf benches that exist there, and the opportunities for dedication and or building new benches. So Anthony Calabrese and I did finally have an opportunity to talk. He's a terrific guy. Will work with us as well on the Lower Wharf, but he was very clear of the fact that their responsibilities do not go beyond mowing and cleaning up and doing certain things that is required of Parks and Recs. We have the responsibility, not for the maintenance of those benches, but we have the responsibility for those benches, and we may, if we choose, take one of those 3 benches and bring it to the Parks and Recs Commission and recommend a dedication of one for any individual, etc. That is the cost is a plaque, etc. Maybe a fresh coat of paint, and that is in terms of what the cost would be negligible. Building a new bench would be a bit more expensive, along the lines of say $1,200, and this is just coming from Anthony, sort of giving us some ideas from that perspective. But the question to the commissioners is, what do we want to do in terms of managing the process, or I don't want to say policing, that's a bad word, but with regard to there being a number of requests for such dedication, and when does it stop, and what are the what can we do, or what kind of limitations we have, or do we want to be in a position to add other benches down there? It is something that we are responsible for. Now, I know for today's meeting, or if there wants to be a motion to saying that we want to be able to increase the number of benches down there versus holding on to the 3 that we have, but I'd be inclined to approach the Parks and Recs for the Panis family to dedicate one of the benches with the plaque and a fresh coat of paint versus building a new one. Now, this is probably the first you guys have heard of this, and again, I said I don't know if there's a motion for this, but I feel for the Panis family. They're our neighbors, obviously. They love the village, and it's a request that they have made. But then we, as a group, have to decide what kind of responsibility do we have for the governance of the property, as well as the number of benches, et cetera, et cetera. So I will pause there and sort of let commissioners comment or think about it, and maybe it's going to be new business next week or next meeting, Kim, to discuss or potentially have a motion.
Well, we can't. The deed restrictions say we're limited to 3 benches,
and got it.
And we the commission purchased the property with Sasquatch. So I think that if we were to, I don't know how you go about changing deed restrictions, but it seems to me at the very least, before we even make the effort to, and it's supposed to be maintained as undeveloped open space. So it seems to me before, if in fact people want to change the character and the benches and things like that of the lower wharf, our first, I mean, we would need a legal opinion, A, and B, we owe the Sasquatch the courtesy of getting their input, it seems to me.
Indeed. And I think if that is the framework that we're dealing with, then that, pretty much answers our question. But what about the... Go ahead.
Yeah, the question that you raise about whether or not we want to be able to offer families the opportunity to have a plaque down there is a separate question. I mean, we have 3 rather large benches. I've seen there's one bench at South Benson Marina that has at least 2 plaques on it. Is there something other than plaques on benches that we could do? Can we put, like the library has done, can we put stones in the ground? Or is there an alternative way that perhaps commissioners would like to consider?
Right. All valid.
Kim, it's Brian LeClaire. I could tell you, generally for deed restrictions, you'd have to go back to the grantor in whose favor the restriction runs, the one that imposed the restrictions, to have them released by a subsequent document. They typically run with the land.
Yeah. So that does limit the bench question, the number of bench questions. It doesn't necessarily restrict us from providing any kind of memorial on those benches, it seems to me.
And do we as commissioners determine the number of people that can be recognized on a bench by plaque? Or because I think the issue was, Kim, your thought, what would we do? And, if there's one dedication, then there's going to be other requests as well, et cetera.
Right. That's a good question.
This is Jeff. What if it wasn't a bench, but it was a plaque of some sort? There's on a big rock. I'm just thinking without thinking, but there are several memorial plaques there. There's one for Harris Russell, and there's one for Steve Galpin, and then there's a plaque that commemorates the purchase of the property. But what if there was another way, like as Kim said, maybe it's not bricks in a walkway, but it's names engraved on a plaque on a rock someplace. There might be other ways of doing this.
Sure.
And Sam, why did you say again we need to go to the Parks and Rec Commission?
Because that's what Anthony said. If we wanted to make a recommendation for the dedication of any bench that's in the lower wharf of the 3, we would have to go to the Parks and Rec Commission. That's what he told me.
That was the question.
I don't think. I think that's the question. When it was purchased by the town with funds from the Harbor Management Commission in Sasquatch, it was our understanding that, and I think that's in the deed. I may be wrong. That responsibility for management was not with the Parks and Rec Commission, but with the Harbor Management Commission. I don't think the Parks and Rec Commission has any authority over the management of that, but that's something we can.
But on the hard assets that is maintained by the town.
Right, you're right, Sam. Somebody comes in and empties the trash. Somebody comes and mows it. Yeah, we don't have anything to do with that.
They paint the benches. They repair the benches. I mean, I would look for clarification, but that I'm certain that's his response, and he made it sound as if that was not a hard thing for one to do, except for building another bench, which we talked about, which is not in the deed, so we can't do that. Are there rocks in the deed? I mean,
well, I don't know. I don't have the deed in front of me, but see what the deed says about who's responsible for managing the property.
Yeah, Betty was just saying she's going to get us a copy of that.
Yeah.
I have an idea.
Well, everybody has a copy of the deed restrictions, and that's a 2-page, 3-page that Betty has distributed to us several times in the last couple of months. So, Betty, if you could get it out again to everybody, that would be great. But the other issue is that we have gone back to the town attorney to request some guidance for what it means to manage an undeveloped open space, which is what the Lower Wharf is supposed to be. And what do we, as the commission, do about plans that were promised, improvements that were promised when the town did the land swap a couple years ago that have not been made, and we have not yet heard back from him. So, again, none of those. It seems to me that we could still go ahead and devise a program for memorials, but there are those other issues about the Lower Wharf that are still open, and we will be having some construction down there to repair the wall and the concrete around the wall, and obviously replace the Lower Wharf structures. So, I'm wondering if maybe there isn't some opportunities to provide folks with memorial notices of some kind.
It does seem like there's an opportunity to document. I'm not remotely opposed to the trash removal and the mowing done by the Parks and Rec Department, but there's no formal sort of documentation of we're responsible for managing the area, Parks and Rec is going to be doing this. I mean, it's sort of just falling into place without any sort of, we don't have any guidance from town council, and things are sort of just getting taken care of, and it seems like we should have a more formal understanding of who does what and what the authority is from town council.
And that's a significant part of the update to the harbor management plan as well, because the ownership of the Lower Wharf was private when we did the plan.
Right.
Now we have to identify that as a public water access area.
This shouldn't be too hard. I think I'd previously suggested maybe we have another little subcommittee like we have of the mooring committee that just manages that space, because to the point that Sam's raised, there's all these issues that come up, and it would be nice to have some people who sort of focus on bringing those issues so we can quickly resolve them.
Yeah.
Sam, is that something you and maybe Eric would be interested in doing? I know he's down there a lot.
Oh, sure. I'm delighted to do it. I mean, I think it is two things, right? There are two swim lanes. The swim lane is the legal issue that we have to deal with the town, and it's kind of appalling that we haven't heard back because it's a big deal, right? And the other is actually the maintenance of the property and a willingness of Parks and Recs to work with us for things that we may or may not want to get involved with. I do not want to be in the world of regulating dog walkers and dogs and beaches, and when dogs can be on beaches. I mean, there's certain rules, like dogs running in the water and fetching things and people swimming off the docks. That's been, we've dealt with that from that perspective. I just, it's got to come from the town. They have to say, this is that, et cetera. But, the one thing that could be a problem if the new restrictions that we may have, we didn't want to have imposed could happen as well. But I think it's up to the town attorney to tell us and give us guidance there. And then, on that other swim lane with the Parks and Recs, they're great people. They want to work with us. They're maintaining and mowing and blowing and cutting and painting the stuff there and emptying garbage. And, and they get complaints about dog poop and all that and stuff like that, and they deal with it accordingly. Yeah, and so
well, I think just off the top of my head, if the area is to be maintained as undeveloped open space, then it seems to me that's not a park. So we're not dealing with the regulations that apply to the other town beaches about when dogs or animals or what happens at what time of the year. But it would be good to have that confirmed by the town attorney. Yeah. And I think that. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, but that has to come from you, Madam Chairman. Say, we're following up in light of some of the other considerations that have to be made for this wonderful open space, et cetera, et cetera. And then we can revisit the deed again and think about rocks and plaques and things like that. I mean, I'm very proud of my stepfather and Harris Russell and being on that rock, and it's nice for my kids to see it and cousins and everyone as well. So.
Right now it is a very, it does honor three very, very important people who got us to where we are now in terms of the commission and regulation in the harbor, and so that's wonderful. Doesn't mean.
And then do you, when we get to the point, I'm opening up another can of worms here, determine who should be honored or could be honored? Is it town leaders? Is it, fallen citizens or neighbors from that perspective? I mean, you can get into a whole different, and I choose not to. I think we should be, well,
I think it's something that the commissioners need to think about as we go forward with our plans to spruce up that area, and to acknowledge that there are people who would like some sort of memorial down there, and just put on our thinking caps and think about what kinds of alternates besides the bench, and maybe there are no alternates, but just what are we comfortable doing? And I'm not sure that that's something that we can decide in a month.
No, I agree. I think really what we should do is be pressing for some sort of legal opinion. As part of the solution set for us to deal with this, wonderful space. And then, if you think about it, then everyone's going to want to be, I don't know, I'm just going to say, I mean, everybody want to have a memorial down there or recognize. We just, I guess, might want to put parameters around it. We can wait for the opinion and then deal with that stuff later.
Okay, well, I can go back to the town attorney and see if he's had any. I chatted with him about it about a year ago, so I'll get back to him and see what if anything he's thought about, and report back. Okay, thanks, Sam.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Any other thoughts about memorials in the Lower Wharf? And
I just have an opinion. I think public spaces should not be used for private memorials.
Okay.
And what kind of precedent does that set? And then before you know it, it's more like a graveyard than an open space. So.
And right now, there's honoring three really important people, and that honoring it stands out because they're the only three down there.
They're the only three down there, and they represent people that have put a lot of energy into the form of into the open space, as well as the early days of the Harbor Commission as well. I agree with that comment that it shouldn't be for a public memorial. For a private memorial, it would complicate things, and I think. But as commissioners, we need to determine that and have it for the record.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to charge commissioners to think about that over the course of the next month and we can bring it up again next month and see where people are, and see if we've gotten any response from the town attorney.
Okay.
Move on it, and Sam, why don't you and Eric
Sure.
kind of put your heads together and think, come up, see what if anything that we haven't mentioned here that comes to mind, and we'll move forward with it. That would be great.
Yeah.
Great,
as long
thank
as
you.
I as long as I don't put no swimming signs up again, that's fine.
Well, now we have a Harbormaster with a patrol boat, so it's not going to be so easy to jump off the piers.
That's right. That boat's very intimidating, Brian. You got to watch out.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sam. Annual report. Mr. Stedman has been working to produce this annual report that I believe he's given you all a copy of. And the plan is to, as you can see in the report, there are links to the various presentations and surveys and things that we've done over the course of the year. And we've gotten the okay from the town webmaster and IT department to track the number of hits that each one of those presentations gets on the website. So we will be able to see how many people are reading the annual report and are curious about some of the good work that Jeff has done. So, Jeff, I hope I haven't stolen your thunder, but why don't you tell us about what you've got?
Well, all I did was put together a statement of what the commission has done. But the language seems to be all, or the text seems to be all correct now. The Harbormaster has reviewed it. Mr. Engborg from the Yacht Club has reviewed it. The commission vice chair and chair have reviewed it. But one thing that we're waiting to do is I guess it was me that sent to Betty the presentation for Southport Harbor past, present, and future, sent it to her in the format of the PowerPoint presentation, not the PDF. So
no, Jeff, I take full responsibility for that. I did that. That's my fault.
Well, but it's not as easy to, when you go to the link to the website and you see the PowerPoint, it's not as easy to scroll through as if it was a PDF. And it also allows for the reader to download it and could potentially make changes to it. So we're just going to replace the PowerPoint presentation with a PDF, and we'll do that, and then the link will be complete, and we can send this out via email. And if anybody...
Great, we'll send it out, Brian will send it out through online moorings.
Yes.
I think it's how we're going to do it, right?
Yes, and historically, we've also made some paper copies for the town hall, and certainly to give to the first select woman's office and the different department heads, which we can do.
Yeah, I think that would be important, especially since we've got some new department heads down there. I think that was very important to give them a paper copy.
Yeah, so as soon as we get the PDF to replace the PowerPoint presentation, then we'll be all set to distribute this. The other links work well in the electronic copy.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Jeff? Any thoughts?
If I've spelled anybody's name wrong, please.
I think this is great. This was one of our initiatives identified a couple of weeks ago to promote, a couple of months ago, to promote our work and give the public awareness of this wonderful resource in Southport. So I think, job well done. Excellent.
Well, it's your work. And also, Hugh Smith was appreciative that we were able to use his photo on the first page.
Yeah, that's pretty spectacular.
You know, he's a professional photographer, and he's got much to add. He's a long-time member of the commission.
So, but Jeff, we're very grateful for your work. It really is a very, very smooth and polished product, and it's going to do us proud. So, thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay, Deputy Harbormaster Selection Committee. We need to have a couple of folks who would like to interview candidates for the Deputy Harbormaster position. I envision that what we would do would be to post notice that we are looking for candidates. I think that we know of some folks who might be interested, but we would make the notice available through the town website, local papers, such as they are, perhaps the yacht clubs, and then invite folks who meet the basic qualifications for the job in for an interview. We would, and patterning this on how we chose what the process was for choosing the Harbormaster, we asked everyone the same questions, gave everyone the same amount of time to discuss and the position with us. And at the conclusion of all of the interviews, we put together a letter recommending recommending our favored candidate, and if we have two others, we would send that roster off to the governor, who has the authority and the ultimate responsibility for appointing the deputy harbormaster. So how much time it would take depends, frankly, on the harbormaster's schedule and the number of candidates who respond to our inquiries. And I say the harbormaster's schedule because I think I'm appointing you, Brian, because I think that we can't have a deputy harbormaster without having Brian's input as to who would be his second in command. So, any commissioners, I need some volunteers.
This is Bill Perugini. I'll work with Brian on that recruitment and selection process.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Anyone else? No one else interested in doing a deputy harbormaster selection process? Okay, so we have a committee that at this point is Bill and Brian. And we will, Bill and Brian, I think you have access to the harbormaster's job description, and at your convenience, you can get started, and I think Jack and I have the names of a couple of candidates who might also be interested, if you wanted to reach out to them, or we could, but we could do that at a later date. Anyone else? Okay, any new business? Any other new business?
Hang on, Kim. Yeah, so can you guys forward the candidates to Brian and I?
Brian knows the only one I know about, which is one of the boaters in the harbor. So
okay.
He and I are the same person.
Okay, and I have the other one. So, okay, I will do that. Yes, absolutely.
And
anyone else?
Just real quick, Kim, by what time frame would you want us to submit our recommendations for the lead candidate?
Well, I think that really depends on how you guys want to proceed. I don't think that it makes sense to get started searching for someone until Brian has got the coming season kind of all wrapped up. But I would think that once we have candidates for the governor, it doesn't happen quickly. That he gets around to appointing them, and if this is an election year, it might take even longer. So I don't know, by the 1st of August, the end of August, at the sort of the latest, and then we'd have someone in place, presumably, 6 weeks later, by the 1st of November, so that if there was an opportunity for Brian to begin to teach the deputy kind of what he does on online mooring, that there would be some, in anticipation of some real work that had to be done.
Okay, great. And I could consult with Brian to identify the key skill set and core experiences that he feels are most appropriate based upon the job description.
Okay.
Great.
Great. Any other new business? Any other thoughts? Any other new business? Any members of the public who wish to comment on anything that we've discussed this evening?
I think you all deserve a well done.
Thank you, Pat Carroll. We appreciate that. We're delighted you could join us.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, if there are no other new business and no other public comment, our next meeting is June 21st, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Jack's moving.
I'll second.
Bill, great. All in favor? Okay, folks. See you next month. Take care.
Okay.